Hey guys, what's going on? Blaine back for another Netflix review, and today I'm going to be talking about Space Sweepers. So right off the bat, anyone who's a regular viewer of my channel will notice that I'm not filming this review in my usual location. I'm actually filming this in my bedroom right now. The room that I usually film in for my reviews is a little bit busy right now, so please excuse the random change in layout, as well as any changes in lighting that may be occurring as a result of my location change. Anyway, with that out of the way, Space Sweepers is a very interesting sci-fi movie. It's probably one of the most interesting movies that's come out of Netflix in recent years. It's actually being touted as the first big budget blockbuster epic to ever come out of South Korea. And it centers on a group of scavengers in outer space who are traveling around the galaxy in search of scrap and salvage so that they can sell it and try to pay off whatever debts that they have accumulating. They're sort of portrayed as a ragtag Guardians of the Galaxy-esque group of scoundrels. The group consists of 4 characters. Taeho, who's kind of like the head honcho in charge. There's Captain Jong, who I guess was second in command. Tiger Park, who's like the mechanic of the ship that they're riding in. And my personal favorite, Bubs the robot. Anyway, they're considered very successful and famous in their trade, but they still have trouble paying off their debts that they owe to a variety of people. Eventually, they get a tip of a certain payload in outer space that could help solve all their problems, so they investigate the cargo load of the ship, only to find a girl stuck in the cargo bay. They find out that this girl is actually high in demand. It's being advertised throughout the whole movie in different media organizations, all the planets that they go to, that this girl is a top priority and is sought by the UTS Corporation. That's basically the equivalent of the Galactic Empire from Star Wars. They own this private planet that's floating above planet Earth. It's like a paradise for the wealthy and privileged, that only the 1% live and then the 99% are stuck on planet Earth. Anyway, the group of space sweepers who ride in the ship called the Victory, they decide that they're going to trade the girl back to the highest bidder in an effort to pay off their loans. And from there, the rest of the movie goes on as they try to evade capture from UTS, and they uncover a big conspiracy going on that involves a girl, and there's just all sorts of things that unfold in the story from there. It's not really the most original sci-fi movie per se, but the things that it does right really make it stand out from the crowd. One of the things I love the most about this movie is how it promotes the diversity of its cast. Although the movie is Korean and all the lead characters speak Korean, there's actually a variety of characters in the movie that speak their native language. And rather than have every character speak in Korean or have their voices dubbed over by some Korean actor or something like that, they actually have the actors speak their native language, and they have a translator device in their ear that lets other characters know what they're saying, and then they speak their native language back to them, and then the other person is able to hear what they're saying. I just find that it adds more to the futuristic setting where Space Sweepers takes place in. Sure, it may have a few stereotypes here and there, like they may have a Russian pilot wearing a Ushanka, or a Chinese pilot that has some boxes of noodles, something like that, but it's never really anything egregious. It never really lingers on the stereotypes, and it does its best to promote diversity where it can, which I really applaud. And speaking of diversity, I have to go back to the character of Bubs. She is far and away the best character in the whole movie. She's funny, she's likable, she can be serious when she needs to be, and you see all these expressions on her face despite the fact that she is a robot. By far the most notable trait that she's got going for her is the fact that she's a transgender robot, and when I first realized that, I was like, wait, that can happen? I was taken aback at first because the character has a male voice, and as far as my attention was concerned, at least in the beginning anyway, I didn't really notice the other characters referring to her by she, her pronouns. Slowly but surely though, we start to see the gender dysphoria unravel from Bubs, and the audience gets a glimpse of what's really going on inside her head as she tries to figure out what kind of skin graft that she's going to get in order to look like a human again, as well as getting a voice module so that she can change her voice in order to sound like a woman as opposed to the man that she sounds like, even though she doesn't identify as one. None of the characters really make a big deal of the fact that she's transgender. They just kind of accept it as fact and like, okay, well, you're still one of us, so you're cool. I feel in a futuristic setting, that would be the best way to address something like that. If someone was experiencing gender dysphoria like that to a degree, they just simply accept it and they're like, okay, it's no big deal, you're still human, or in this case, a robot. Basically, whatever you choose to identify as, that's what you are, and they don't really linger on it. What matters the most is if you can get the job done. And man, oh man, can Bubs get the job done. She's always flying around from one ship to the next, piercing them with her harpoon, and then she's like, just the way she flies around outer space and just wreaks havoc on any ship that comes near her was so cool. It was by far one of the most original things that I've ever seen in a sci-fi movie. We don't really see any characters flying around space at all these days. I find sci-fi movies, they try to be more realistic than they actually should be, considering that they're already taking a lot of liberties with sci-fi in general. And as a result, it feels a lot less fun whenever I'm supposed to be watching a big budget sci-fi blockbuster. It was great to see Space Sweepers just cut loose and have fun with the budget that it did have, which you can tell by watching wasn't very big, at least compared to another movie like, say, Star Wars, for example. But when you look at the movie and you see what they accomplished, just from an artistic perspective, all the colors, all the settings that all the characters went to, everything was beautifully filmed. You would never know that this was made for, I think, $20 million or something like that. The filmmakers definitely made use of the time that they had with this movie, and they made every dollar that they had count. The only complaints I really have about Space Sweepers is, like I may or may not have said in the beginning, the plot and a lot of ideas that are occurring in Space Sweepers just aren't really all that original. I feel like the idea of the rich planet floating above planet Earth where all the wealthy live, all that stuff, I feel like that's been done to death. The movie that I couldn't stop thinking about in this regard was Elysium, the Matt Damon movie. That movie had a similar theme where there was a bunch of wealthy people living in their own private paradise while the 99% of people living on planet Earth were forced to live in complete poverty and starvation. It's not necessarily a bad thing when a movie rehashes other ideas. I mean, it's hard to be 100% original in any movie, but I just feel like the idea of trying to overcome the wealthy elite with a ragtag group of individuals has been done to death many times. I also wasn't 100% sure of what was going on with Tejo's side of things as far as the story was concerned. Tejo is actually the one who develops the closest relationship with Dorothy, the little girl who's found in the cargo bay of the ship. And we see all these flashbacks that Tejo has of his interactions with his daughter, who I can't remember if she died or if she was taken away for whatever reason, so I really feel bad that I wasn't paying enough attention to that aspect of the story. But I just felt that there were one too many flashbacks happening in the story that personally for me kept interrupting the flow of it all. I can understand why they made those parallels. They're trying to compare his relationship with his daughter to his relationship that he has now with Dorothy and how he's trying to redeem the mistakes that he made in the past. But I don't think they needed to make it as dramatic as it ended up being. I find that this is something that happens in a lot of Korean movies, K-dramas in general. I mean, they're famous for that in particular. They're famous for having protracted sequences of drama where there's all sorts of terrible things, the characters are constantly sad, or at least from what I've seen anyway. Even What Happened to Mr. Cha, which I reviewed last month, there were a few dramatic scenes that, in my opinion, went on way longer than they should have. I wouldn't mind if they had like 1 or 2 flashbacks connecting to Tejo's daughter and then they went straight back to the story after that, but I felt like they did that a little bit too much, and as a result, it kind of left me feeling distracted from the overall story. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention another awesome part. Richard Armitage plays the CEO of UTS in this movie, and he is absolutely fantastic in the role. I almost thought that he was Sean Bean the first time I saw him, and especially whenever I was listening to him, because he speaks with a very deep baritone voice. I'll admit that he's a bit of a cliched character as far as being an evil CEO is concerned, but I just couldn't help but love it every time he was on camera. Every character that he interacts with is terrified of him, and he always knows when something is going on, especially when he's interacting with the whole gang on the Victory ship. He knows whenever they're up to something, especially when they have a contingency plan. And I just loved how intelligent and diabolical they made him in this movie. I think if it weren't for Bubs, he would be my favorite character in this movie. Overall, Space Sweepers is a very fun ride from beginning to end. I was thoroughly impressed with what they did with this movie, considering the budget that they had behind it. I think this is the kind of sci-fi movie that Netflix should be making, rather than trash that we get like with Outside the Wire. It drags on a little bit longer than it should. I think it's 15-20 minutes too long, and there are elements of it that are pretty cliched, but overall, it was still a lot of fun to watch. The action scenes were great, the settings were great, the color palette was great. It was one of the most vibrant spectacles that I ever had the pleasure of watching on the Netflix service. And the personality of all the characters on the Victory ship, especially Bubs, was icing on the cake. If you're a fan of science fiction movies and you're looking for something completely different from the norm, you owe it to yourself to check out this movie. I don't think I loved this movie as much as others did when it came out, but I still had a fun time watching it. Anyways, guys, thanks for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and as always, stay tuned for the next part, where next time I review the French comedy, The Misadventures of Eddie and Cokeman. Bye-bye.